Welcome to Section 3, Signs and Symptoms. As founder of Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, I've traveled across the United States and Canada. I have interviewed thousands and thousands of firefighters and EMS, and we've broken it up into many surveys, and one of them, though, is signs and symptoms of especially suicide ideations. And so in this particular section, we'll be talking about the signs and the symptoms of fire service. What might you see in a firefighter or EMT? High levels of stress. In one of our most recent surveys, out of 335 firefighters and EMS that we surveyed, almost 85% responded that they suffer from high stress and anxiety from the job. So this is one indication that when you're working with that client, they might be suffering and they might not even realize it. And that's one of the keys I love about, you see so many surveys out there saying, 70% of this and 90% of this and 80% of this suffer. And a lot of surveys out there say that almost 85 to 90% of those who have suicidal ideations or completed suicide show signs and symptoms. I don't believe it's that high in the fire and EMS. Why? Because we are great actors. We are able to take things and bury within ourselves, so they just might not show signs and symptoms. Earlier in the program, I alluded to how when I call fire and EMS chiefs and they tell me the number one thing they didn't realize were signs and symptoms, it's because they're able to hide them. Or maybe they just didn't realize those were signs and symptoms. This is a key aspect as a counselor to try to understand, are we hiding something? Are we showing something? Marital and family relationship issues. You might see a lot of this in the fire and EMS. Our top 5 reported known reasons why firefighters and EMTs take their lives. Number 1 is marital and family relationships. Number 2 is depression. Number 3 is medical, any type of medical issues. Example per se, firefighter diagnosed with cancer does not want to be a burden to their family, so they go out and they take their lives. The number 4 reason is addictions. With that cultural brainwashing, we've always been trained ourselves to handle anything on our own. So if something's bothering us, maybe we're not sleeping well, hey, it's easy to stop at the liquor store and pick up some alcohol. You drink a 6-pack and, I slept not too bad last night. Didn't have any of the nightmares or the visions and dreams. And you keep that up for a couple days. And then maybe one day you're out somewhere and you can't get to your alcohol and you have those nightmares and visions again. And so the following day you're back at it, and before you know it, you're hooked. It does not make you a bad person. It's just it's that easy to get hooked. So when we look at these marital and family relationship issues, we always wonder, why is the divorce rate so high in the fire service? Is it because of the job and the cultural brainwashing and how we feel that, hey, you know what, we haven't changed? Well, guess what? I tell firefighters in all our workshops, if you've been in this business, you've changed, whether you realize it or not. And how could we not, with all the things that we see and do, and all that's the pressure from our brothers and sisters put onto us to act a certain way. Even history's dictated that we act this way. So these are just some of the struggles. Depression. I always tell people, what's ever out in the world is here within the fire and EMS service. And depression truly falls into that category. What we find, though, is because the fire service and the EMS service is so far behind in education, is that when someone is diagnosed with something like depression or bipolar or ADHD, the knee-jerk reaction by the fire departments or EMS organizations are, hey, we have to pull you off the job. We got to see how the medication, how that plays out, and how does it affect you. Yes, I grant it, you can't be out there with any heavy narcotics because of back injuries and you can't function correctly. But there are so many other drugs that we can perform and do our job. And what the problem there is that when other firefighters or paramedics see that their partner has been taken off the job because of some medication, they decide to stop taking theirs. Addictions. There's a list of addictions that firefighters have fallen prey to. We look at, of course, alcohol, drug addictions, prescription drugs. They get hooked very easy because they feel better. Their back injuries, their shoulder injuries, they're non-existent now, and they become hooked on those drugs. numerous reports of firefighters and medics stealing the medication off the ambulances and engines. It's just way too many to report. It's happening out there. Addictions such as pornography or sexual addictions, food, gambling, they are out there. It's our way of coping with certain issues that might be bothering with us. Once again, it does not make us a bad person. And please don't judge. I tell firefighters and counselors, until you walk in their shoes, do not judge what our actions are. The medical issues. I always tell firefighters, you are one slip off a ladder changing careers. Always have something to fall back on, because medical issues such as, say, we talked about cancer, that burden, that maybe they have to be retired from the job, shoulder injuries, back injuries, lifting the stretcher and the cot, falls, injuries in the fire service. You just never know when today might be your last day. And firefighters struggling with those issues and signs and symptoms that play out through depression. They're just unbelievable, the amount of firefighter suffering. Financial. So many of us, fire and EMS, are suffering some financial issues. Maybe a spouse lost their job, you lost a part-time job, or maybe just the threat of your fire department closing. These are all concerns that you might have to deal with as a counselor or a therapist in regard to the firefighters. How about post-traumatic stress? It's a key word. You usually hear it in the military. It's becoming, unfortunately, very popular in the fire service. And I don't have to explain what PTS is and PTSD to you as therapists and counselors, but let me just give you an example of how it might play a role. My first fatality that I went on as a firefighter, way back when, I jumped off the engine. This was on my volunteer department. I jumped off the engine. My lieutenant says, Jeff, go check out that pickup truck. It was a head-on collision between a semi and a pickup truck. And what appeared to be a pickup truck was just a ball of metal. And as I approached it, where the driver's side door should have been was just a hand sticking out of the metal. Obvious fatality. I retired, as I mentioned earlier. I retired in January 2015. A few months after that, I was driving down I-17 north of Phoenix. It was a beautiful day, sunny, 75 degrees. Had my window down, as did most drivers. And a car passed me. And out their window, they had their hand. And it put me right there, 26 years earlier, to that vision of that first fatality. And it scared me. It absolutely scared me. I'd never thought about that in 26 years until that image. And I thought, where did that come from? Being a counselor myself, trying to understand that whole aspect of it. How many of us are suffering from those calls? And I've talked to thousands of firefighters, many with 30 years on the job, who can recall in detail accidents 30 years ago. They live it. Now, it's not to say it pops up all the time, but for those firefighters and EMS that are suffering because of nightmares and dreams and visions that haunt their sleep or haunt their daily life, it's very difficult to function. So PTS, it's a very real symptomatic issue within the fire and EMS service. And what about suicides? It's happening. We don't like to talk about it, but it's happening. In the last couple of years, Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance has tracked more firefighter suicides alone than line of duty deaths. Line of duty deaths have 100% reporting. FBHA estimates about a 40 to 45% reporting. We are missing a lot, and yet we have more suicides by firefighters than line of duty deaths. It's a key issue. It's something that has to be discussed with not only through counselors, but through the fire service. And working with firefighters that having suicidal ideations, I commend you as therapists and counselors to try to help save my brothers and sisters. It means a lot to me. The methods of suicide that have come in to FBHA are absolutely scary. As you look at this list in the PowerPoint, you see risk cutting and jumping, electrocution, stabbing, firearms. The way that we rank them coming in through the reporting system through FBHA is firearms are the number one known reporting. Hangings are number 2. But you look at this list here on the PowerPoint. Immolation. Setting yourself on fire. How much pain are you in as a firefighter or EMT that you have to set yourself on fire to end your life? I just can't even fathom that. You see the term seppuku. It's a Japanese honored, time-honored way of taking their life through a sword into the stomach. We had a firefighter going through a divorce, called his wife into the bedroom and took that sword and disemboweled himself in front of her. You see one on there that really just shakes me to the core, especially when I heard it from the reporting system or the reporting person that I spoke to. Dynamite. How much guilt and pain are you in that you hold a stick of dynamite in your mouth and light it off? It's just... And then you look at the bottom right there, easy exit. It's a term that's unfortunately become very popular in society as well as in the fire and EMS system. Easy exit, a plastic bag around your head with a tube connected to some type of gas. You turn on the gas, it displaces the oxygen, and you fall asleep. You know, these are the things that are happening within the fire and EMS world. These are why I implore you as counselors and therapists to get involved to help stop and prevent these. For the amounts of firefighter and EMS suicides, I can't even estimate how many of those that are suffering from addictions, post-traumatic stress and depression, and many other issues. I commend you for helping my brothers and sisters. We look at the top 5 warning signs. I interviewed well over 1,500 firefighters. Top 5 warning signs for suicide. You see there it says, think rails. It's just a word I picked out when we looked at all the top 5. Number 1, recklessness and impulsiveness. Now, these aren't in any particular order, but recklessness and impulsiveness. I don't believe in guns. I don't mind that people carry guns. I just don't believe them. But if I was to walk into the firehouse one day and say, hey, you know, I was at the sporting goods store last night and I picked up a couple handguns and an assault weapon, what would be the questions from my brothers and sisters at the firehouse? Yes, I know as therapists you're thinking, oh, well, why would you do that? But that's not what it is. Because in my presentations, when I approach the firefighters with this scenario, their questions are, hey, what'd you buy? How much did it cost? Are we going hunting? And it's that issue within itself. Because we just don't believe that we would be thinking of taking our lives. And that impulsiveness of running into burning buildings, maybe when there's no other firefighters or rigs on the scene. You see a lot of that in volunteers. They get paged out from home and they rush to the scene to try to help those, yet they're running into burning buildings. And it makes me wonder, what's their thought process? Is there something going on in their lives? Because I don't believe that's the training they received. These are the things that we have to look out for when you're talking and working with firefighters. Is there some reckless actions that you're hearing? Once again, be direct. Challenge with compassion. Anger. Yes, anger is well documented within the fire and EMS service, especially come job promotion time. But you see a term there that I put on the PowerPoint called displacement. You know what it is. A lot of firefighters don't know what that means. They get hollered at work by their fire chief, and instead of saying something, which you can't, out of respect, you can't, shout back at them. They keep it inside until when? Until they get home. Until they get home and they complain about it to their loved ones and spouses. Many times throughout my career, I can remember coming home and telling my wife, I can't believe this and I can't believe this. Do you think she wanted to hear that? Not at all. But I haven't changed. No, I haven't changed. Isolation. I believe this is probably the greatest sign that people can see is isolation. When a brother or sister of ours in the fire or EMS is not getting involved with the company as much as they used to. Or maybe even in their personal lives. They are not doing the things that they love to do. Fish, hunt, golf, work, whatever it is. Being involved with the family. They start isolating because they don't want to be a burden to those around them. Once again, challenge. Challenge yourself when you see this happen. Talk to them. Say, I'll walk the walk with you. Let's get you some help. This next one, loss of confidence in skills and abilities. This one caught us by surprise. These were engineers, the firefighters that drive the engines and get the water to the hoses for the firefighters to attack the fire. They could not remember how to run the pumps on their engines because they had things going on in their lives. They had lost all confidence in their abilities and skills. These were paramedics I spoke to who said, Jeff, I couldn't remember the drug dosages, the policies, how to help people because things were going on in my life. And in one particular interview that I did with a paramedic, I'll never forget. I'd been on the job 11 years. And one particular call, he said to the junior paramedic, said, you ride in the back with the patient. I'm going to drive because he had so much going on in his life. He was 4 miles from the hospital and he could not remember how to get there. These things are scary. And you could just see the tears in his eyes as he explained it to me. Sleep deprivation. These are things they didn't tell us in the fire academies and EMS academies, that you are going to be suffering from some of these issues. And one of them is sleep deprivation, well into retirement. So if firefighters are saying that you're just not sleeping well, go a little deeper into that aspect as well, because the cadence of sleeping when you're working at the firehouse and you're waking up 2-3 times in the middle of the night, it just throws everything off within your system, and you carry that home as well. Sleep deprivation, watch out for it. And you see at the bottom there, lost their sense of humor. Do you know where we're seeing more and more of that reported to FBHA? That's in our retirees. Retirement is a section that I could talk for hours on. In fact, I created a new workshop because of it. But lost their sense of humors. And that's a key, because we have that type of humor to help as a coping skill within the fire and EMS service. So these are our top 5 warning signs to watch out for, in particular working with fire and EMS. I want to quick talk about some top issues for spouses and partners. Anger. When a partner or spouse, they're feeling anger because maybe their firefighter or medic loved ones, they're not doing what they said that they do. Their attitude, their behaviors towards the family has changed, and they become very angry at their loved ones. Jealousy, and not in the aspect of relationship, but more jealousy in the aspect of, why are you putting the fire and EMS service in front of your family? There are many times I've spoken to loved ones who said, I'll be off to work and I'll call my spouse and ask them, what are you doing today? Well, I'm going out golfing, then we're going out fishing, we're going out hiking. And they become very jealous and thinking, geez, why am I working so hard? And you get to do what you're doing for 2-3 days because you don't have to go back to work. They become very jealous of their loved ones. Trust. Trust is a big issue because they are told by their loved ones that they will get jobs done. They will do things around the house. They will go places, and yet they back out and they don't do it. So there's a whole lack of trust on what the firefighter or paramedic will say and do, and will they follow through with it. Abandonment. Many spouses and loved ones feel like they're just not as important anymore in the lives of the fire and medics. And yes, there are studies out there that range anywhere between 50 to 75% of all firefighters and medics suffer divorce. The last one is that emotional disconnect from their loved one. They're just not there for their needs anymore. Maybe their lives, their plans have changed, and yet they haven't informed their loved ones. So they have that emotional disconnect. They're just going through the motions of being a family. So those are our top 5 warning signs. We want you to not just concentrate on them, but look out for them. They're important, and if you're working with spouses and the families of firefighters and medics, just remember that they can also suffer the same aspects of the firefighters because of abandonment, lack of communications, lack of relationships. So now we are going to go into role play number 3.
So where do we start today?
Well, I think we left off that I was having some issues at home, and they continue. They absolutely continue. Since we last met, we went to a party, my wife and I, and she got really upset but when we got home. Was really upset at my actions at the party. And so it wasn't a favorable night that night.
What happened?
And well, as you know through our previous sessions, I have a tendency to drink, and binge drinking is something that I have a problem with. And at this party, it was just one drink after another, one drink after another.
Okay.
And she's the same, oh, I'm embarrassed at the way you act. And I said, well, I'm embarrassed for you being my wife. And it just escalates from there, and it's no good.
That's no good.
It's no good. And it's very difficult. And I think she has mentioned many times that you drink a lot.
What about this night or this party that makes it different from the others?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of difference, unfortunately, with the binge drinking. It's not all the time, but it just seems like it possesses me. I have one drink, and then that went down way too easy, and then I have another one and another, and before I know it, I've lost count.
But you're bringing this one up, and is it because it was recent, or because in some way it's different?
Well, I think it's because afterwards of what my wife said. She said that all your drinking has caused us to have financial problems. And I thought, what? What do you mean financial issues? I don't understand where you're going with that. And then she said that she found an empty bottle underneath the bed.
Of liquor?
No, pills.
What kind of pills?
Some medication.
As in?
Some prescription medication that I use.
From what?
Well, I told you in that first session that I had a shoulder injury years ago, and just the therapy through the surgery and getting the rotator cuff back and the therapy. So, I finally got back on the job about a year ago. So, and
We're talking painkillers then?
yes.
Like Vicodin?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you had this surgery and you were prescribed this medication, why would she be upset about finding an empty bottle? What's the catch here?
It had someone else's name on it.
Okay, keep explaining.
And you're tough. I have a tendency to mix alcohol with medication, Vicodin.
Did she know this before, or did she just find out?
She found out that night
How long?
because she found that bottle with someone else's name on it.
How long have you been doing this?
Does this stay between us?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever stopped after surgery.
So you are heavily addicted to taking Vicodin.
Well, what's your term of addiction?
How many pills are you taking a day?
About a dozen.
And how are you getting them?
Well, let's just say I'm getting them.
Okay. So you have a supported resource, and you're addicted to the Vicodin. She thought it was drinking all along, but I imagine the financial hit that the Vicodin is taking, because the street price of it's...
About $4.95 a pill.
Okay.
And yes, she's also wondered why bill collectors have been calling, because I told her that I was home with my injury. I told her to, because she was working full time, I would help do my part with the finances, and I would take care of the financial aspect of our house. And she's wondering why bill collectors are calling.
Are you taking the dozen on or off shift, or both?
Let's just say I cut back a little.
Just to
when
survive
I'm
at work.
Right.
So just keeping the shakes, the sweats, the shits away.
That's about it.
Okay.
Believe me, I can't wait to get home to to get to my pills.
How much of this does she know about now?
She doesn't know a lot about where I get the drugs at and the bills that are unpaid so I can get the drugs.
Okay. Are you ready to be sober?
I'm not ready to face her wrath.
Are you ready to be sober?
Is it the alcohol or is it the drugs?
What do you think?
I don't know. All I know is that I feel pretty darn good and I'm able to function. And when I'm in that mode, I seem to be a pretty good father and a pretty good husband. But when I'm running low or something, I can tell real quick. And that's why I pop another 2.
Are you ready to not be a slave to the pills so that you can be a better father sober?
I don't know what that looks like anymore.
What do you imagine it to look like? What can you envision for yourself?
I don't know. That's a tough question to ask because I don't have any shoulder pain anymore. But will I have it if I stop the alcohol and the drugs?
That's a good question.
Because, like I said, I feel pretty good on the medication.
I think the main thing right now is asking yourself, are you ready to be sober? Because for what you're describing, physically, financially, and going to work, you pissed hot on something, you're done. You're going to ruin your career, possibly your marriage. Are you ready to be sober?
What happens if I said no?
Then I guess we have something to talk about.
I love my wife and kids. I'll do whatever it takes not to lose them. But it's tough for me not to lose this feeling good. And I guess I'm afraid that if I stop taking the drugs and the alcohol, will there be shoulder pain from the rotator cuff, the surgery? If I'm working in the firehouse and I pull a hose line wrong and I jerk that shoulder, and will the pain be there? I know it won't be there with the medication and the alcohol.
All good concerns, but it'll be more difficult on this path that you're on. Possibly losing your job or your marriage and your family is way more difficult than the pain of going through sobriety.
Yeah, but isn't that the gamble every firefighter and EMS takes?
You want to gamble some more with what's
Every
going on?
time you go to the job, you gamble your life.
You want to gamble through alcohol on the weekend, parties, and fighting with your wife. That gamble, that's the one I'm talking about.
That's a tough call.
What
I've been doing it for, unfortunately, so long.
What's a tough call? To not gamble your marriage, to not gamble your physical health, your financial health, your ability to even go to work?
I mean, you present a strong argument, but like I said, I've been living this for so long now, to me, for a couple of years.
I get that it sounds scary, but there are so many options and there are things that we can do to help you. There's definitely a team of people that can come in and help, and it's confidential.
Is this one of these things, because they always say at the firehouse, ADA laws, that if you go to your chief and say, hey, I have a problem with alcohol, they're supposed to help you? Or is this something I don't have to tell them about?
You can go either way. We can treatment plan. The idea, though, is are you ready to be sober? After this weekend, after what you've been through, where you're at financially, are you ready to be sober?
Does that mean I have to take time off from the job and go inpatient?
Not necessarily.
It's a tough call. I mean, I shouldn't say it's a tough call. Yes, I'm ready to save my marriage and my children. I want to be there for them. But like I said, to have that euphoric and that no pain, it's tough to give that up, because you're addicted to it.
It's easy to give it up. It's tough to do what you're doing.
Denying?
Living this way, you have bill collectors.
Believe me, it's tough. It's wondering phone calls, and they say, hey, why haven't you paid this bill? Why you haven't paid this bill? Well, when I got to go get my Vicodin, that cost me, $500, $600, $700 a month, $800 a month.
You ready to have that back?
It'd be nice to have my life back again.
Then let's do it.
So what's that look like?
Well, there's a couple of options. You could do the ADA route, go into treatment. There's facilities that specialize in treating firefighters or generalized professional groups and even general population groups. You could also go to a psychiatrist or a doc that can prescribe other medications to keep the addiction at bay while you're working on getting sober. So,
How long of a process? I mean, is it? I mean, I don't know. Is it 2 months, 8 months, 12 months? Is it up to the individual, or
an
what?
inpatient program's 30 days, but it could be up to the next year for Vicodin, the next year of your life trying to get sober.
That bad?
It's a long haul.
I think if I truly want my wife to be with me, I think it would be time for me to have her by my side through this journey. She was there for my surgery and things.
Maybe the next step is to have her come in here and we talk about option A or B and you two can make a decision together.
I think she'd like that.
Let's start there then.
I think she would like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in this role play, we know in the fire service that addictions such as alcohol, gambling, drug abuse is, unfortunately, the rate is very high.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about firefighters and paramedics, EMS, wanting to handle their problems on their own, and alcohol is an easy solution.
Yeah. And it almost seemed like he was treating the alcohol because of the Vicodin, you know, or there's just a nice, you know, or not a so nice combination for him, you know.
As a therapist, what is the percentage of working with clients that have alcohol issues? What is the success rate? And for them to stay in that, or is it, you know, they'll have a fall once or twice?
It depends on the client, and I think that's why I was pushing the question, are you ready to be sober? Are you ready to be sober? Can you envision yourself, you know, doing this? Because some of the guys come in and we talk about being sober for quite a long time. And then something has to happen, some pivotal moment where they're like, okay, now I know why you keep asking me that question, I'm ready now. And then that's when we could really start sobriety treatment or refer them to an outside source. Or in my area, I have a doctor that I refer to especially for Vicodin addictions, you know, and they have a way of putting them on medication that is not illegal and they're not gonna, you know, fail a drug test, and it could help keep them sober, you know, as they work on the therapy side.
And I know in all states the laws are different in that aspect, but knowing that a firefighter is on Vicodin while working, how much of a challenge is that for therapists?
It is, because you know that essentially they're high, but you can't report anything. You know, if there's no intention to harm someone, you know, there's nothing to do except for help that person get to where they want to be. If something happens, you know, that is on them, and I constantly warn my clients of that. Right. You know, and I think I said, if you drug test and you're hot because you know, ran the engine to the back of the wall, or right, you pushed the wrong medication or something, you're going to be done.
Right, which are automatic urine and blood samples anytime you're in a vehicle accident, even if it's not your fault.
$500 or more, you're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it becomes very tricky, you know, but you can't break that confidentiality or you ruin the whole treatment, you know, so right, it's a tricky place to be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. And that will end role play number 3.